what's happening at the Nez Perce County Historical Society. And you have to have a little bit of background. There's a sign outside that says coming soon. And that sign is on Capitol Street, and that sign is on 3rd Street, both places. And we're going to add a building. So let's go through how we got it, how the community has been associated with this since the 1870s. So they all came for gold is the theme right now to help you understand. Immigrants came here for a variety of reasons. They came here because of economic opportunity. They came here because the family members were here and to escape hardships. So this is common to all of us, all of us. The only ones that can be better than that is Native Americans, and they moved here about 16,000 years ago. So they migrated also for the same reason that these are up here, the list of why people moved. Well, in Lewiston, you had people moving like the Italians, and they were located right in this area all the way to where the mill was. The original mill took their land. But if you look at the names, we've had some of these, the Mirandas, the Arnones, the Spinos of the field, the Lupinaccis, the Grecos, Risponis, Lillos, Galanos. Those are Italians that came here and they settled this whole, the Miranda cabin that we have on campus was right out on the flat where 21st Street eventually sits. So we've had these students in our classrooms. Black people came here. This was after the Civil War. They ran a way house in between, so you could go to Moscow and you could stay overnight or get something to eat. And so this was out of Deary. You had German Jews and the Grosteins and Bernards and Goldstones. Now, the Bernards bought an old hardware store down on Main Street, farm implements, and they turned it into the Liberty Theater. And so they were instrumental on downtown. And then you have the Chinese, with the Li families, and the Ng, and the Liang, and Sang, and Loi, and Lu. Most of them, though, had a paper name. And some of these, like the Liangs, Leoing, their actual name was Ng. They were all from the same geographical area in China. But they gave them a paper name so they could, well, we've got 5,000 Ngs. We got to give you a different name. It was called a paper name. Now, in China, I work on 4 mao land, less than 1 acre, year in, year out, from dawn to dusk. But after taxes and providing for family needs, I make $20 a year. You make that much in one day. No matter how much it costs to get there or how hard the work is, America is still better than this. And this is a Chinese farmer in the 1870s, 1880s that wrote that. That is why the Italians came here. That's why the Germans came here, the Irish. So these people that we're talking about, the Chinese, are no different. They're part of immigrants that were coming here. Where'd they come from? Well, they started in the 1840s when the gold rush, and they were going to Gamsong. Gamsong was Gold Mountain, and Gold Mountain in California. And you can see they all came from the Canton and Guangdong area in China, South China. That's because and it's reflected in when we go to a Chinese restaurant, we're eating Cantonese food. That's where that came from because the immigrants came from the Canton area. And Hong Kong's there, Macau, these were open ports. And things were really bad in China, and they moved out because they could help their families by sending money back. Well, they got to the Hawaiian Islands. There's quite a large population of Chinese Americans on the Hawaiian Islands because they stopped and didn't go any further. Now, they came for the gold just like white guys. And they came for the gold, and they worked all up and down the rivers and in the gold fields. And you can see in 1860s, then the gold fields changed because they were in the 1860s. Gold was upriver about 70 miles. Now, they couldn't own a mine, and they didn't come here because there were laws that Chinese couldn't mine. So it was later. The first wave was whites. And they came from California, and they brought California Spanish names. First hotel where the museum sits, the first hotel was called the Luna House. Luna, Spanish for moon. And Hilbeachy, had a hotel in California. Guess what it's called? The Luna House. So he brought that name and his wife and his partner, husband and wife, best friends, and their name was Magruder. And if you read history, those two couples traveled together up here. Now, they came up, and they came by sailboat up to Portland, and then they started to take into the gold fields the steamboats. Now, this is 1861 in the Dalles, a newspaper, and it said the road between the Dalles and Walla Walla, we were told, is thronged by pedestrians all the way to the mines who are lacking the means to travel by steamboat, only by a cayuse, which is a horse. So they walked here if they didn't have the money. Remember, most of the miners had the pack on the back, and that was it. So consequently, this shows the miners walking from the Dalles. But pretty soon, they put in steamboats. This is the only actual steamboat ticket I've found so far. It's from Celilo, and it's by the Lewiston Steamboat Company. It is a little bit later in the 1880s, but that's the only one. This is in Stoughton County Museum. It's the only physical ticket that I've found so far. Now, when they got here, the boats went up and started to go up the river. And when they went up the river, they found that the clear water was shallow, and it was swift, and it had rapids. Lewis and Clark documented 22 rapids between Orofino, Spanish name, Orofino, 2 words, not 1 word, 2 words. Oro, gold, fino, fine, flower gold. Now, they got going to get closer to the gold, and they couldn't make it. They got the Big Eddy and turned around. And they said, hey, we're loaded with miners. We're not going to go up there because it took 2 days to get to Lenoir. And they came back in about an hour and 20 minutes. And it was a waste of their time because they wanted to maximize their profits. So they said, we're not going up. We'll go right here to the confluence. We'll dock. We'll put the gangplank out and offload all you guys, and you figure out how to go up there because we're making buku bucks. Within 6 months, there's 3 steamboats built specifically to take miners to Lewiston. So Lewiston becomes a stopping place, a port, and all the steamboats. And by the 1880s, you have almost 11 or 12 steamboats that are coming up on a regular basis and docking. This is 1862. This is the first known photograph of Lewiston. And you can see after Lewiston, right down here, it says WT, Washington Territory, because this was not Idaho yet. And you can see D Street and 3rd Street. And right here, it says the Luna House. That is where the museum is. So that has a historic place, a historic location. And the Nez Perce County Historical Society was called the Luna House Museum because they picked that name because of the proximity. And that's how it started out. So why'd they all come? Well, you can see the amount of money. 2,500,000 ounces of gold came out of Idaho Territory. And it peaked, you can see, in 1864. Why was it important? Abraham Lincoln knew where Lewiston was, and he knew because he needed the gold to finance the Civil War. And he wanted to ensure that those steamboats brought every bit of gold down and took it to San Francisco where there was a mint and put it in the United States of America coffers. So he was very familiar. Now, how many miners came? Yeah. Lewiston was larger than Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and Portland put together. Lewiston was larger in the 1860s. Remember, Seattle had 247 residents in 1860s. There was no one there yet because it was like a cliff. So remember, in the value today of that gold, you can see that's $11 billion. That motivated a lot of men to come this way and invest in this town. And pretty soon, the Chinese in San Francisco heard about it. Now, this is the ledger from the Luna House in 1862. This was before Chinese were allowed to come up and own a mine or work a mine. It was illegal here for the Chinese to come. Well, this man's name is Hop Lee, and he's from Hong Kong. This is the ledger from the Luna House, September 10th. I think that's 10th. Why is this important? Because we think, historians think, that this man was an advanced man, cultured, learned English, had very good skills at communicating, and he had nice clothes. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the best hotel in Lewiston. They wouldn't let him in. He was checking it out. When can we come up with our teams of Chinese, our groups of Chinese that we fronted the money to get them over here? They got to pay us back. And so the Chinese came not as one person, they came as constricted, that's it, men who owed the company to get over here so they could get more money so they could send it back to their folks in China. And so they came in up in groups. And when they were walking up here, miners go, where are you going? Who are you? Where are you going? They didn't know English. They said 1,200 mai. 1,200 mai. Now, oh, you're going to go to Lewiston. I mean, that's how they communicate. Where are you going? Oh, no, don't go that way. Go that way. 1,200 mai. So that became what was a direction finder for them. Now, they ended up in Florence. They ended up on the Snake River. They ended up all over a region. And this is a miner with a shaker box at Florence. Now, how many of these people came? How many Chinese came? Well, you can see by the darker color, this is Nez Perce County and Coeur d'Alene, and this is 1870. And you can see down here, there's dark places that show over 30%. When the white miners couldn't make enough money in Pierce, they left. The Chinese stayed and worked all the tailings, and they made money. And it was 5 Chinese to 1 white man in Pierce, Idaho. So you can see 28.5% of the Chinese were in Idaho Territory of the population. So large contingent of those Chinese workers. Now, here's some people from all over. You've heard of Polybemus, and you've heard maybe Agun, but Q Owen was they took care of the dorms at the normal school, and he was a cook, and he had a big warehouse downtown, and he sold, had a store, and then in February in the 1880s, it caught fire. And February is when Chinese New Year's, and it was loaded up with fireworks. And the Tribune wrote how much fun the kids had in Lewiston, going down and watching the fireworks go burn up and go all over the city in February. So these were local folks. Now, they also were not primarily coming for the, well, they're primarily coming from the gold, but they also supplied their own food by growing it. So if you go up in the Hell's Canyon, you'll see China Garden Creek, China Cap Creek, China Bar, Chinaman's Gulch, China Rapids, China Massacre Cove. Those are place names of along the Snake River. Because not only did they go up there, but the teams went up and were encouraged to go find the gold. And if you go to Chinese Massacre Cove, which is on Deep Creek, you will see people today with pans out, and they'll find some gold today coming out of the mountains at Deep Creek. They're panning for gold for fun, right at the mouth of Deep Creek. Now, you can see these residents, a lot of Chinese stayed around this in the 1920s, and this was a parade on Main Street, and you can see the location. It's 11th and Main Street. Large building is the Bargain Hunter Mall today. And they were depicting miners, and this was celebrating of Lewiston State Normal School, that name change in 1922. And also they stayed around because you can see John and Ella Davies had a housekeeper. And so you can see this Chinese lady kept house, and their building is right down. Hotel Idaho burned, that's Brackenberry Square. This is where Ridinger Photography is, in that building on Main Street, right next to Brackenberry Square. That's the John and Ella Davies building. Also, if the Chinese, and many of them became wealthy, when they needed help, they hired a white nanny as they accumulated the wealth. We're still trying to find out where this photograph is, but I put it in there because it's really interesting. You think all of them were domestics. No, you know, those with money then could hire nannies, and they probably paid really well to get that lady. There were some people, Ings is a family regional village name coming out of a region, and it more or less says that's where your ancestors are and have been there for thousands of years. So the Ing family, Ted Lloyd and Ings, how many of you went to Ings restaurant? Yeah, and that was run by the Lees. And they had 5 girls, and the girls are still here in the valley, graduates of Lewiston High School. So Ing's Restaurant was a place. And if you know a man named Fred Scheibe and Lewiston Civic Theater, he lived down there with Jack and all his girls. But Ted was associated with all the restaurants. This is Raymond Cafe. Raymond Cafe is where the parking lot is across from the Center for Arts and History. It's a parking lot that has a mural on the wall that you see. That was the Raymond, and they were celebrating, and Ted was and you can see the Chinese people in here. The Majestic was owned by the Leongs, and I don't know if you had any of those in class, any of the Leongs. There was 5 kids, And those 5 kids come back here, and they're really excited about what we're doing at the Historical Society. And so you can see they were everywhere in our society and our town. Now, go back to 1870s. In the 1870s, how did water, there wasn't any normal hill. How did they get water downtown? Well, they're on the floodplain, so you didn't have to go very deep for your well, but it was always full of sand. And so the city then paid and contracted out to have a ditch about 2 more miles up the Clearwater, and that ditch came down right at the edge of the bluff and came down, and that's how everybody got their water. And it was dug by Chinese laborers. Then they brought with them their religion, and they put the first one down on A Street, and that was their temple. That was their church, and they put it on A Street. But A Street, with a huge flood one year, there is no more A Street. The P plant was the back of the P plant before we got the bypass. The back of that was A Street. And then that flooded out. So the second one was down where, behind the hotel on Snake River Avenue, that area, and it burned. And then the next one was number 3. And I'm going to show you a photograph, because we have photographs then in the 1880s. And then it moved again to number 4. So let's look at where it was. This is number 3. And so this was, the sign over the door says, Lit Sing Gong. It doesn't say Buckeye Temple. It says Lit Sing Dong, Temple of Many Deities, because there was traveling Chinese, and as they came through, this is the Taoist religion in China, not Buddhist, but Taoist, and there's 5 main gods. So you had to have something so you could pray to your own one of 5 when you came in. So this was the Temple of Many Gods. And these signs right here, we have the original ones. So this is what we're looking at right here, the temple. Behind it was the Hip Sing Tong. And the Hip Sing Tong is where the caretaker of the temple kept the lamps burning. Everything was protected. And he lived here. And this is the 3rd home. This is the Lewiston Morning Tribune building when they moved. So you can see the railroad tracks were behind the Lewiston Morning Tribune on 5th Street. This is the back, the east side. And the Hip Sing Tong is social. Now, that temple was called many things. The Josh House, the Temple of Many Gods, the Buckeye Mao Temple, the Buckeye Temple, the Buckeye Temple, however you want to spell it. But it was called multiple things during the time that it existed as a functioning temple. Now, the Hip Sing Tong, what was that for? Oh, well, you could get a bed if you were a traveling Chinese man. Or you could play mahjong or cards, or you could get something to eat. And it was a social club. So there was 2 separate buildings. Now, this says Buckeye Temple because these men right here were the last generation that were in there using it as a religious temple. And some of these men are not with us, or most of these men weren't with us anymore. And Eli Thomas Ng was the last caretaker. And when he died, and the Tribune wanted to expand for their print, their press, then he passed away and they knocked the building down. Both buildings were demolished. Now, so all of what was inside 2 buildings was put into this block building, which used to sit right by the loading dock of the Tribune. Now, there was that caretaker, and he lived there for a little bit, and then they boarded it up when he passed away. And consequently, this sat until 1991 with everything, all these beautiful artifacts and the temple inside. The roof started leaking and vandals, so they covered the windows, and the staff, the guys that were moving all the papers and everything else off that loading dock at the Tribune, they'd watch it at night and chase people off, chase vandals off. So it was intact. Now, this man who graduated from Lewiston High School, Gordon Lee, and Gordon Lee said, everybody's gone. We have to protect it. Who's going to protect this beautiful historical asset? And Gordon graduated with Butch Alford from Lewiston High School. And the 2 of them were very instrumental in saving all the artifacts, the temple, everything that we have. And so we went to LCSC, and in 1991, all of what was inside that block building went to the Center for Arts and History. And I don't know if anybody of you were involved in cleaning everything that was inside. And the college president, who was she? Deanna Vickers. She gathered all kinds of resources to clean and protect all of those assets that were in that last place. So it got moved to the 5th then. Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was the 5th one. And so this is what it looked like inside. And this is the temple piece. This is the Hip Sing Tong temple. And let me see. So it was right here until just 2024, 25, when we started, we being the Historical Society, started asking questions. We have been for a long time asking questions to move it to the campus. Well, the problem was, why didn't we do that sooner? Why didn't we take it in 1991? Because this is all we had. We had just expanded to this building during that time period. We had the Heritage House, and people were talking about selling the 1890s Heritage House. We only owned this much land. So we had no place to expand, and we had a very limited space in the museum. And we didn't have the resources to take care of it. Well, that changed because we then acquired the rest of the block. And we started putting things on it like a 1920 trolley. And then we moved the Idaho Territorial Capital, which was always a plan to put it as close as we could to the original site. And that building, this was the original site right across the street. So we pointed it towards where it was in 1862 and saw legislative. So you can see it out the door. We placed it there. Now we had space. And we said, okay, we have the space and we have the desire. And we started negotiating with the college. Well, March of 2025, then we signed an agreement to take all of the Buckeye Temple, which historically that's what people have called it. Everything got transferred. And the college, it was negotiated, and the college did that because it had nothing to do with the history of the college. Also, it was taking up space in the Center for Arts and History, and they were going to repurpose the use of the Center for Arts and History. And it cost them a lot of money. And it was a time to write grants to keep it up. Plus, remember, there was a fire downtown, and the fire was in the Center for Arts and History. And that took a tremendous amount of time, and the Buckeye Temple had to be recleaned and put back in and relocated. And so we worked on that for a year. So we signed an agreement in March of 2025. And so now, when we looked at it, after the fire, a lot of artifacts were put in a safe in the building, and they never were brought out. So I would say half to 60% of these artifacts never saw the light of day when it was moved from the block building, because there just wasn't space, and there wasn't, it was floating around. What do we do? And you can see how they were stored, and you can see it was in different cases, and we have all this, but now we inventoried, we being the society inventoried, and we put up a partial display of these pieces and the original temple inside the museum. But you see, it's really difficult because it's too small, the ceilings are too low, and hundreds of artifacts are in the basement that haven't been seen, and we want to put that out. So what can we do? We don't have anything in the main museum. It's taking up space. We had to take things out, and we have this issue. But this is what it looks like, and you can go see it at the museum, because look at the height of the ceilings inside this building. It was really tall, so we have to build a building that has 12 feet inside, because that's how it was displayed before. So now the plan starts, where are we going to put it? Oh, we hired an architect, and we have all the construction drawings and all the concept, everything, and he says it'll fit right next to the territorial capitol. Now, the interior, then you can see that it's going to look like the original 1880 temple. But we're going to do it a little bit different, because wood siding, it's going to be concrete, but the same width as the 1880, but it's going to be concrete to make it fireproof. And the roof was wood. You don't put wood roofs on them anymore. Cedar shakes. And so we've repurposed Idaho's first bonded and licensed winery was in Lewiston, and the corrugated steel is about 3 times as thick as modern steel, corrugated roof, and the city took it all off, and they were going to salvage it. And we went to the city and said, don't do that, repurpose it. Oh, we can't give it to you, it's going to go on auction. So we bought it on auction, and we paid $450 for 1920 corrugated, and it's beautiful, and it's got this great patina. So it's going to look, and did the research to know that in 1880 they had corrugated steel. So it's not, but that'll make it fireproof. Well, this is what it's going to look like. You can see how gorgeous it is, and these are all original. And we have a gentleman who is seriously thinking about giving us the original altar cloth, which is rare in North America. There's only 1 or 2 in the United States. And this is probably the most complete temple in the United States. Walla Walla had a temple, it's gone. Boise had a temple, it's gone. It was destroyed. we have this existing temple that's gorgeous. And these are all, and the peanut lamp that you put peanut oil in. And all of these are just gorgeous, but we can't show that until we build the building. This is what it's going to look like in the interior of the building. You walk in, arches, all the signage is going to be there. And so that is going to be to the original height. And all of these roof joists are going to be painted black. The whole ceiling's black because that's what they do in Chinese temples. When you walk in, it looks like you look up and it's just a black void. God's up there, or one of the gods. So we're going to continue that theme, and it's a replica, but it's going to be as close to other temples as we do. And the Hip Sing Tong, the altar, the front 40% is going to be temple, the back 60% is going to be all the artifacts, all of the daily things that they use, and we have a lot, hundreds and hundreds of pieces. So this is the plan, and this is the Hip Sing Tong altar pieces. And I just want to say there was a terrible tragedy in 1887 at Chinese Massacre Cove. Well, you can understand what it was. And history books never said that. They never said Chinese Massacre Cove. They always put the most terrible massacre was in Colorado, and they killed 28 people. Until research was done just a number of years ago to determine the number of Chinese that were killed by these 5 horse thieves out of Joseph and Enterprise. And they came down to get the gold. And those Chinese miners were at Deep Creek, and they had gold. And these 5 white guys came down and slaughtered them. And it became an international event. And then it was forgotten. Oh, the 5 guys, they went to trial in Joseph. They were all acquitted because they were just killing celestials and they weren't human. But the story is really great. But the donations came from this Chinese community and the surrounding area. This marks every donation that was made after the Chinese massacre. It's all in Chinese, all the way across, and this row is just women. So you can see maybe 5% of that total names are women because they weren't here. They didn't bring them here. They were going to go back home. And so these donor boards we have. And on one side of the replica will be these donor boards. On the other side will be the donors today that can give the money and help finance this Chinese temple. So what I have is, that might be enough here. Flip those around. A brochure. If you're so inclined.
How many were killed in the massacre? How many were killed in the massacre?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. It was 37. For 5 years, we took people up in jet boats to see it. And then the 5th year, that's another program. The 5th year, then we placed a rock, a memorial rock, that had Chinese Massacre Cove, Chinese. It was written in Chinese, 1887 Chinese, and it was written in Nimipu because that was their land, and it's written in English, and the rock sits at Deep Creek, facing not with the information, not towards the river, because we don't want anybody to go up and dig and disturb anything. And if you go up and down the river, you have to get out of the boat and go see it. There's no way to see it from a river. And it was purposely done that way so we would not attract attention. And we're going to reinstitute that, but 87, and Massacred for Gold. So this is what I've been telling you quickly, and on the back is how you can donate. Remember those folks, those donor boards? Some of them donated 10 cents, the Chinese population. Some of them did 20 cents. Collectively, it was under $100 that they donated. That's what we hope to do, is make it a community effort, and that's what it's asking. And if you have any inclination to help us, and Dennis said something, it's a $300,000 project. $100,000 to put the building up, $100,000 to outfit the interior, approximately $100,000 to continue, because we want to train docents, and it should be a learning place. And we have a library, and we already are seeing people donate. Back to the Majestic Cafe, the Leong family owned it. They graduated from, almost all of them graduated from UW. They were here for the Apple Bowl. They came down to the museum to see that tiny little display. They were teary-eyed because we were showing it to them. They said, we're not here, but send us a whole bunch of brochures and a letter and everything else, because we went to school with a lot of Chinese Americans and we keep with them. And oh, here, by the way, it's $1,000, and this isn't the end of it. That kind of community, because I've been talking to John Leong, and he said, I appreciate what you're doing. And it was part of my history, his history, and his folks' history. And he said, I'll get money. We'll generate. This isn't the end of the money, donations. So people have been really grateful. This is just to tell you a little bit about it. You had a question, Pat?
Yeah, I noticed that the buildings that Temple sits in are very, very small, so they wouldn't accommodate a lot of people, you know. So where did they just come in and do an individual, you know, homage to the temple, or did they have to wait outside, or where did they gather? There isn't, inside the building is very small.
Right, and both buildings were small. There's just a couple of beds. That was just for transients that were coming through. Vincent Sang owns a restaurant right across that bridge called the Golden Dragon. When his folks came here, the Leong family, who owned the Majestic Cafe, gave them, they put them up in an apartment next to theirs, and they gave them jobs. And so they helped them until they could get on their own feet, and then they opened their own business. And so Vincent Sang is how old? About 40 years old? Somewhere 35, 40. And he is so wonderful because he's done the history of everybody, because they were all related, more or less, in some way. How long did I take on that one, Dennis? Oh. I tried to keep it short. Anyway, yes.
I graduated with one of the English kids here in Lewiston, at Lewiston High School.
Oh, good. You'd have to ask him which one.
I would if I could talk to him. But I have a picture of him in my father's yearbook.
Wow, that'd be great.
So I'll look it up.
Yeah, Steve Branting got a copy of the 1956 Lewiston High School, and all the decorations in that book are all Chinese. It has a Chinese motif because of the Chinese people and the association. Well, yes.
33 or something like that.
So I taught fourth grade and did the river trip for years, but I noticed the Miranda cabin, is that where it used to be the Kirkwood?
Miranda Cabin sat right here. Then,
Miranda cabin?
as they developed this corner, they moved it to the Pioneer Park.
Okay.
And then when it was in Pioneer Park, the sprinklers hit it. And we had to move it to where we could not get sprinklers. 1870, that's 1870. And now it sits on the campus, and we're going to move that behind. It's now where that new temple replica is going to be. So we're going to move it back there this spring and start on the structure.
The Chinese massacre, I can't remember the name of the book, gentleman that last 10 years, but, so the 5 people, aren't their names like written?
One of them,
Yeah.
they said they didn't do it, and then he got guilty later in life. And then at the courthouse, they put an arch in when you walk into the courthouse, and his name is on there, one of the pillars. Yeah, great. Noakes, Greg Noakes is his name, the author. And we're going to try to get him back to talk.
What site area?